Okay, so I'm excited about what we're going to do today. Very excited about it.
Tell me more.
We've got a mutual friend of the podcast that we both know. I would like to bring this person on, but I have a question for you that we have to resolve before we move forward.
Is it okay if I don't act surprised when we bring him on, since he's just kind of over there looming in the other part of the room?
It is okay.
Okay, cool.
But I have to answer this question
Yeah,
first.
sure.
Okay, so on the podcast, years ago, you came up with a term that's very interesting. It's called the third chair.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, explain the third chair, just so the third chair knows about the third chair.
Well, there are two different types of conversations you have one-on-one with a friend. One is the kind you know nobody else is going to participate in or hear, and therefore there's no reason to be cognizant of that other person because it's not for them and they're not here. But then there's the kind of conversations you and I have where, from a practical perspective, it's not exactly easy or feasible to invite everyone who is going to be sitting in on the conversation with us to a microphone, but still, we're cognizant of them. And we're having the conversation for us, but we're also having it because we care about whoever's sitting in the third chair. And we think about them when we talk about things. So the third chair seemed like a way to acknowledge that what we're doing here, it's friendship, it's conversational. And by sharing it, it's the third chair in the relationship. That's a good thing.
So to be clear, the person listening to this podcast right now,
They're in the third chair.
they're in the third chair. Okay. So I have a question.
All right.
You and I are in a room.
Yep.
And there's an individual in the room with us.
Yes.
They're sitting in, I'm looking around the room, it's basically the third chair. You see that?
Dude, you're breaking the podcast.
I know. We just have to figure this out.
People aren't going to like this.
But the question is that person right over there, are they in the third chair or are they in the fourth chair?
How about 2A?
No. So
You can't just bring in a guest and have them immediately bump the people who are normally a part of the conversation down a chair. Then they automatically resent the guest from the beginning, and we want the third chair to like our guests.
So what if we do it this way?
How do you feel when somebody comes over
I don't like it.
and you get bumped down to like the kid table at Thanksgiving or something?
That's actually in the Bible. I strategize. I sit at the kid table first and then have them invite me to the adult table. I learned that
You
long
seriously
time.
just Bible me?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
You Bibled me.
I did a Bible. Yeah. So
Well, Pythagorean calculus inflection point, maybe something in there gets you back.
all right. So
Those are science terms I've heard people say.
you're kind of leaning towards what we're going to talk about
Dang
today.
it.
But I propose the following solution.
All
I
right.
propose that the audience is listening to the podcast. They're the third chair. And then when we have a guest here, we don't say the number of the chair that the guest is in.
So your solution is willful ambiguity that everybody can see through?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you're sitting over there at the kid table at Thanksgiving and everybody's like, they're all just tables.
Right.
But you look around and everybody's just ripping snot down their cheeks
that's
and
the dumb
playing
table.
with toys and stuff. You're like, I don't know. My eyes tell a different story than this.
Do you like it?
Grandpa, I think you might be patronizing me right now.
What do you think?
But they're just all the chairs?
Yeah. But the audience is in the third chair. And then we have a
They're
guest on.
always in the third chair, no matter what.
That's my proposal.
Okay, so maybe I bump down to the fourth chair for this one.
No.
I'm at the kid table, aren't I?
You are.
Dang it, I knew this. That was such a nice way of getting me there. But I understand, and I accept.
All right. Here we
And
go.
I wanted to have some Ecto Cooler with my Thanksgiving turkey anyway, so let's do it.
Let's do it. For everyone in the third chair, I would like to welcome our guest today, Dr. Steve Bateman. How's it going, Steve?
Good.
So, Matt, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I think we're first going to talk about Dr. Steve Bateman, and then we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. So, Dr. Steve, I've known for almost 10 years. Did you know that? We're going on a decade, pal. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
And is it all right if I just vouch the JPMs are going to go up for a second here? Is that okay?
Yeah,
'Cause-
they kind of have to based on your profession. Yeah, how do we do this?
All right. You know how when you see somebody who's real good at testing rockets or real good at making YouTube videos or public communication, you appreciate that in a little different way, Destin, than you appreciate somebody who's good at something you're not really into, like ice hockey or curling or whatever.
Right.
You can tell, it seems like they're pretty good at that. but there's no nuance. It's just, oh, puck went in the net again. That's good. I think you're supposed to get it in there. But somebody who does what you do,
yes,
you do the peace sign to your eyes, to their eyes. I see you and I see what you're doing.
right,
That's how I feel about Steve.
right,
He is, to me, a model of what it looks like to be ascendant without becoming arrogant in a job that is really hard to do for a very long time.
and that job being
Pastor of a local church.
right. Steve, I've known you for a long time, and my favorite thing about this is knowing that you're uncomfortable with us talking about you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. See the way I'm avoiding eye contact?
Yeah, you're not looking at him.
Nope,
He doesn't know what to do.
Not going to do that. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you this, Steve. So it is Dr. Steve Bateman.
No, you don't have to say doctor.
Well, I was going to say, I've never actually heard you reference your doctorate. I've never heard you with your mouth say that you have a doctorate.
Yeah.
And that's on purpose, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you look at the history of the professions, for instance, lawyers have doctorates, but you don't call them doctor.
What do you mean?
They
Lawyers have a
doctor
doctorate?
of jurisprudence.
Oh, okay. All right. So
It's there's several doctoral degrees you can get in the ministry, and so I typically don't play that card.
okay, well, so I won't talk to you about it then.
Yeah.
So Matt, you were explaining what Steve's doctorate is, and I don't understand.
No, it's a little different deal. I was explaining what the degree before he got the doctorate is. So this is something people don't know about well-trained pastors. To be good at this is to be a holder of knowledge. Like, I know there are tons of people in the third chair who are like, I don't think there's a God. Like, I don't believe this. I don't go to church. Awesome. I mean, we've crossed that bridge a gazillion times with each other. And obviously, everybody in the third chair who's in that place in their journey of belief and understanding of the universe and themselves, clearly they're people who are very gracious and able to think outside themselves because they're here hanging out with us. And we are people of faith. You and I both think there is a God and God is knowable. And it's interesting because this whole conversation we're about to have really actually has very little to do with this subject matter.
Right.
We're going to talk about logic and so forth. But hey, here we are. All of that to say, acknowledging fully that we are in a very diverse room of very diverse opinions, but we're all people who seem to be able to think outside ourselves and like each other anyway. I know that it would be easy for a person who has never been around church to be like, oh, that's kind of lowbrow. It's for people who believe a thing. And just got to admit, there is that kind of church. There is a very, very simple version of all of this, but Christianity is a historical, religious, intellectual tradition. There are complicated ideas there that distill down very neatly to the simplest truths that resonate with the human soul about life, death, aging, meaning, purpose, God, forgiveness, atonement, all the stuff. There's a reason it's scratched the itch for a gajillion people around the world forever. So it plays very simple.
It's the big questions, right?
It's the big questions.
Yeah.
So it plays very simple, but also, I mean, below that tip of the iceberg is this mountain of knowledge from intellectual giants who have tried to tackle huge questions about the soul and life and Bible and all of that stuff. And there's just a lot to know in order to be able to do this well, because unless you want to just go it solo and shoot from the hip and be like, I had an opinion I thought of about God, kind of, and just say it with authority. If you want to do it right, you first have to humble yourself and go learn what everybody else, even people you deeply disagree with, have already thought through for thousands of years. And so you cannot do that in a quick associate's degree. It just doesn't work. You can't physically internalize that much knowledge. You can't really fully immerse yourself in that without taking a lot of time. So over the years, there's a program that's developed called the Master of Divinity. You don't master divinity. It's just what they call it. And so in this program, you learn at least 2 study languages. It's usually going to be Hebrew and Greek, not Greek like they speak now. It's a different version that was common in the 1st century AD. Then on top of that, you got to learn practical stuff. On top of that, like just how to lead a church, how to organize your thoughts into a talk. On top of that, you have to study a 66-volume book. If you're Catholic, you even get a few more. And so that's
called the Apocrypha, right?
Or the Deuterocanon, depending on who you talk to and how flattering you want to be. It's a 90-plus hour program. What most people call a PhD is less in terms of total time investment than a simple master's degree that your local pastor down the street has who isn't talking about their degree or telling you what they've done.
Steve, is that a fair reflection of what an MDiv is, a Master of Divinity?
Yeah, and the MDiv, Master of Divinity, is usually a 3-year program. So my master's degree is a Master of Theology. That's a 4-year program. And so it's just more Greek and Hebrew and more systematic and historic theology.
We're not to the doctorate part. Is that the fair assessment of what you've done?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, Matt, what's the doctorate part here?
Yeah, so this is the key thing. What that means is someone who has that training has been trained not in how to repeat the things that they already think. They have been trained in how to interact with the most complex, most important ideas, and they've been trained to learn how to do it sympathetically, even in disagreement, because theoretically, they are the next generation of people upon whose shoulders future generations will stand intellectually. So they are carrying the baton, and they have to be competent to carry that baton, both as a professional academic, but also as a practical academic who can make that make sense to people who went to school for something else or just have other things to do during the week and can't throw all of their energy at that. So it's a massive training program with at least a couple thousand years of history, depending on how you count it. It's a very big deal and something that is way underappreciated in society right now, both in and outside of the church. It's way underappreciated. You could not pry that out of him.
I know.
But what I'm telling you is the truth.
So what is the doctorate thing? Steve, what do you have? It's called what?
It's a doctor of ministry. So you can go 2 routes in the ministry. Usually, if you get the PhD, that's usually the academic degree. If you want to teach in a seminary, a graduate level, in terms of theology or historic theology, church history, if you go that route, that's the PhD. So the doctor of ministry is the practical degree for working pastors like me who are just responsible for a local church. I'm responsible, along with a team of pastors, for about 1,500 people in their spiritual care.
Okay.
So that practical degree, it's for the everyday ministry to real people in real career and marketplace situations, and trying to keep their marriage together and their families together and raise their kids, and how Scripture comes to bear on all that.
In a lot of ways, a D-Min is meant to chase masters of theology, masters of divinity, to bring this academic who's just spent 3 or 4 years at very high level, doctoral level, historic degree stuff I was just telling you about. It's meant to bring them back into the practical world of what the heck actually happens in people's lives. Because you go and you get lost in that world for years, things change, and you can start, you've just been hanging around with other people speaking a language that pretty much nobody speaks in that form anymore and haven't for 1,500 years. There's a bunch of practical stuff that you need other people to specialize in and specialize in training pastors in. And so the D-Min is the highest level of kind of that boots on the ground training for the person who also has the academic training. One of the complaints, if you're around the academy for very long, if you're around academics for very long, is that you kind of figure out there's not a good mechanism for taking ivory tower scholars. There's a reason ivory tower is a saying. Out of there and having them be able to function with normal people and accomplish normal things. Yeah, this degree is meant to accomplish that.
That's right. So we need the PhDs. We need those guys and those men and those women in the seminaries and the graduate schools doing the research. They're doing a lot of research. They're publishing articles in peer-reviewed journals and that sort of thing. They're writing the commentaries. And most lay people, especially the technical commentaries, that's not accessible to them.
What's a commentary?
So a commentary would be commentary on Scripture. So if you wanted to study the book of James, there's 2,000 years of scholarship that has the interpretation of James, historical background of James, what James is dealing with in terms of the cultural background and all of that. So to bring a proper interpretation, there's only one good interpretation of that passage. What the local pastor has to do, he has to be able to interact with all that technical, scholarly work that the PhDs are producing. And we've become the brokers of truth for the people of of God who are just in their everyday lives.
So you make it accessible.
We make it accessible.
When I make a YouTube video, me and my buddy George helps me. We spend a lot of time, and it'll take us 2-3 months to work on an individual video that's played for 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at what local pastors do, and I think to myself, whoa, you did what I do in 3 months in a week.
Well, there's a lot of parallel with what you do. So you interact with a lot of the technical scientific research and things that most people are not going to be able to do. And you bring it to a level where it's accessible to people who don't have that background. But they're curious, and they want to learn.
And they're smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just didn't have time to go and learn the thing you went and learned.
I don't have time, especially now. There's so many ethical issues with the advance of technology and all the things that are happening now, and especially in the area of medical technology that Christian scholars have to work through. I don't have time to do that. I depend on the work of the PhDs who are working at that level.
Oh wow!
Then I can interact with that. I know what they're talking about, and then I can mediate that to people just trying to live their lives.
Well, one of the reasons I was most interested in asking you to come on, and Matt and I talked about it, and we agreed this would be very, very interesting. You're brilliant. Your mind is impressive, and I know that makes you uncomfortable to hear that. I've had the opportunity to sit across the table from you many times and have a meal, and when you're not in the pulpit, so to speak, and you're just shooting from the hip, it's some of the most thought-provoking conversations I've ever had. I mean, deep, deep, deep water stuff, and I love watching you squirm right now because you're also incredibly humble.
I feel like I'm a dump truck trying to keep up with a couple of Lamborghinis.
I think of Lamborghinis as being a sexy vehicle, and I'm looking at you, and I looked in the mirror this morning.
You ain't no Lamborghini, brother. That might be a Vespa. So one of the things that is most attractive about your mind to me, obviously you're a man of faith. It's not even that. Your ability to think critically, your critical thinking skills are off the chart. And I'm interested in your mind from a secular point of view. Like your ability to take a thing, an argument, and dissect it and be, I don't know, even the person on the other side of the argument from you, I've noticed that you're very charitable in how you articulate their position. I wanted to talk to you about how you do that. And one thing I know you love, because I've heard you talk about it, are logical fallacies. And I want to learn more about that. And we have this saying here on the podcast, JPMs, Jesus is per minute. People hear, hey, there's this pastor coming on. It's probably JPMs are going to ramp up.
We did rail it for the first 5 or 7 minutes here.
We did. But I'm interested in your thoughts on these fallacies, logical fallacies. I've heard a lot about it. I have not been trained in this area. Matt, I know you have. Steve, I know you have. So I'm kind of the dumb guy in the room here. I know a couple of them. I've heard of something called the red herring fallacy.
That's a good one.
I've heard of the false dichotomy. Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Is that it?
A false dichotomy or a false dilemma?
False dilemma. Okay. I've heard about these things, but I don't know what they are. I have an idea of what a red herring is, and ad hominem, I've heard of that, but I'm quickly depleting my gas tank on this information, and I know this is important stuff because I know this is how you spot truth. And am I on the? Is this right? Mm-hmm. What do I need to know, Matt?
Well, this seems like a good place to start. Steve, what is a fallacy?
A fallacy is a misleading statement or deceptive statement. Sometimes it's intentional. Often, probably most often, it's not intentional. It's a sloppy way of thinking. For an argument to be sound, it has to be a valid argument, but also the premises have to be true.
I'm sorry. Okay, so valid, is that a technical term, or does valid mean, okay, is that a casual term, or is there a technical way to know if an argument is, quote, valid?
Yes. I mean, this is the history of the laws of logic. It's valid, it's acceptable, it's a validated argument that we can accept as a people. So it has to be valid. The structure of the argument has to be valid. One of the most common syllogisms is, if A, then B, A, therefore B.
So I'm sorry. Slow that down.
Yeah.
Say it again, please.
If A, then B.
Okay.
If A is true, then B is true.
Okay.
That's the first premise. So the second premise is A is true.
Uh-huh.
So the conclusion, therefore, B is true.
Oh, it's the transit. I learned that in geometry.
Sure.
It's called the transitive property of angles. Or
It's basically
congruity.
taking math and putting it to words.
Okay, so this is cool. So
Yeah.
I can feel it happening already. So we're taking what I love, math, science, things like that, and these tools are a bridge to what you do, Matt.
You remember a long time ago, I was telling you that I don't think we are on a spectrum where you represent the far end of hard sciences and the tangibly provable, and I represent the far end of historical speculation and opinion sharing,
Yes.
but that rather I think we are on a horseshoe where we're using nearly identical tools, that the only difference is the way we can probe the subject matter we like, but the rules of logic we then subject the subject matter we like to. It's the same rules of reason. So it feels way different, but it's actually very similar.
I can feel what's about to happen here. So I've been limited by my vocabulary my entire life, is what this feels like. And you're about to give me some tools.
Haven't we all?
Yeah.
And the common denominator is truth, right? You're both after the truth. 2 + 2 is 4. That's true. And but the same thing applies in the humanities and history. That kind of seeking after objective, absolute truth that's what you're both after.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard the term logical fallacies. Why do people point them out, or you don't use a logical fallacy, you just look out for them? Is that how it works?
Logical fallacies are the stuff of political propaganda and advertising. What you're trying to do is you're trying to bypass the intellectual thought and get right to the feelings. So propaganda is designed, whether you're trying to sell something or whether you're trying to get somebody's money or get somebody's vote. Propaganda, in its negative sense, is designed to make you hurry up and feel something versus slow down and think something.
Okay.
So what logic is supposed to do is get you slow down and think. That takes more intellectual sweat. What propaganda is designed to do is to get you to hurry up and feel. You feel fear, so you got to move. You got to take action. You feel happy, or you could have this feeling of being satisfied if you bought this product. You're trying to bypass the logic in most of that kind of messaging.
Stupid, hideous, oversized trucks should be banned nationwide. So there's an argument in there.
Yeah.
But I employed a fallacy too. The fallacy was, I told you what to feel, and that is self-concluding. I told you, the argument should lead you to consider the conclusion that maybe trucks are getting too big, and that maybe we should do something about that. I don't think they're nearly big enough. I think we can get those things, I don't see why with using aluminum and lighter weight metals, we couldn't get a Ford F-150 to be 16 feet tall.
You drive a truck, Steve, right?
I do.
What do you drive?
But it's a 2-wheel drive GMC Sierra.
What does it matter if it's 2-wheel drive?
Well, you're carrying less weight around, so the mileage is better. Most people who have 4-wheel drive don't need them.
Okay.
And it's nice to have it when you need it. So when we have an occasional ice storm here in Alabama, all my friends with 4-wheel drive that I've been ridiculing will call me and say, "Do you need a ride somewhere?"
They mock you.
Yeah. So it's their turn to mock me.
So what was the fallacy?
Y'all are going to make fun of me for my bear spray until the next time I use
Right.
it.
But
You're right.
I always said 4-wheel drive gives you the ability to get stuck farther away from home.
Dude's not wrong.
That's pretty good. You said there was a fallacy in that statement, but I didn't.
You didn't catch it?
No.
But it's not so much. You use some feeling where it's like stupid. You told us already that this is a stupid thing.
I led with the emotional conclusion and then followed with a fake argument.
I don't think that was a fallacy, though. That just sounded like an opinion.
I think it's fallacy. I don't remember which one you call it, but that's why we brought Steve. To me, that fallacy is the ultimate example of leading with emotions. It's like
the appeal to emotion.
It's the leading the witness fallacy.
I'm trying to remember what you said. Did you use the word because in there? I can't remember.
No, there was no because.
So you're not making an argument. You are sharing opinion at that point.
But I'm presenting it as though the foregone conclusion is my opinion.
That's right. You're trying to persuade us.
Yeah.
That's really what this is all about. How are you going to persuade people? Are you going to persuade them with emotion, or are you going to persuade them with reason? And I'm kind of on a crusade, especially among professing Christians, to make America reasonable again.
Oh, I see what you're doing there. I like that.
To be reasonable.
Oh, I laughed. I wasn't supposed to laugh at that, was I?
No. I mean, you can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I really am. That's
I did.
That word is used in Scripture. In fact, there's so many times it's okay. We're talking about Scripture. Is that right?
Yeah, whatever.
You're going to let me do that since
I mean, it's kind of who you are.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
So over and over again, there are admonitions in Scripture to people who profess to be Christians that are imperatives in the Greek. That means it's a command. This isn't a suggestion, okay? And they go like this: do not be deceived. Several times, do not be deceived. Let no one deceive you.
So that should not be understood as you don't have to be deceived.
That's right. And it's one thing to be gullible, but it's another thing to be willfully gullible. And I would like for Christians people who claim to be Christians to think about the fact that it is even a sin to be willfully gullible. And what I mean is you don't take reasonable steps to be able to discern the truth, whether it's in the media or anywhere else.
Oh, so you're saying that you have to adhere to logic and reason.
We have a moral obligation to be reasonable people.
What does it mean to be reasonable? Like, reasonable sounds like a word that I get to choose. Oh, it's completely unreasonable for you to ask me to do this.
It means,
but maybe it is reasonable.
Well, it means that you arrive at your decisions through reason, and logic's going to be part of that. But discovering the truth is a part of that too. So you got to be able to discern the truth in the media or whatever. In a logical formula, you have to have true premises. That requires fact finding.
What's a premise?
A premise would be the statement, like in that syllogism, premise A, it would be if A, then B. The second premise 2, would be A, and then the conclusion is therefore B. But to begin with all this, you've got to be able to use critical thinking skills and another number of other ways to discover the truth. You got to have facts. In 1770, at the Boston Massacre, several British soldiers were brought to trial. And most people have heard the phrase, facts are stubborn things, but they don't know where it came from. So it was in the 1770 trial where John Adams was appointed to be the attorney for the British soldiers. And you can imagine what the crowd in Boston thought about these British soldiers. He looked at the jury and said, facts are stubborn things. And he brought out the facts, and he saved their lives. They were not convicted of murder.
I didn't know that. John Adams, the second president of the United States.
Right. He defended the British soldiers at the Boston Massacre.
Would he have considered them an enemy?
He would not be friendly to them because they did not like a standing army quartered in their city and sometimes in their own homes.
So even though he had an enemy, he kind of knelt to the facts and let the facts determine the truth.
That's right.
And so he fought for the truth. He didn't.
The question is this true? This is why it's really important to understand we got 3 safety nets in this culture, largely due to the influence of Christianity on our founding. One of them in the First Amendment is a free press. And what the free press gives you is competition. And competition is good. And what that means is there's not one source for your news. You can have a Fox and a CNN. You can have all these other news sources coming at you from different perspectives. So when we think about the check and balance system in our government, we think of, there's 3 branches of government, and therefore they check and balance each other. But you got other checks and balances, and the First Amendment is one of the best ones. So you got the press checking the power of the state because they're constantly looking for scandals and corruption. Now, is their motive always good? Probably not. There's a profit motive here. I don't care what the motive is. And by the way, that's another fallacy, is the appeal to motive fallacy. It doesn't matter what the motive is of the press to find dirt or to uncover corruption in the government. I don't care if they're in it for the money. What matters is what's true. I want to know about that corruption. I want to know about those lies, right? So you got competition in the press. You don't have to depend on one news source because then those media outlets keep each other in check. They can report on each other. And so what just drives me crazy sometimes is professing Christians who only listen to one source when we're not taking advantage of or exploiting the reality that we have multiple sources that we can use to do fact checking. competition in the press is the first safety net. The second safety net is the court. What keeps a check on the press is we got a legal process, and we can sue for libel and defamation. Mm-hmm. So it's one thing to make a claim on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter or X or whatever it is. It's another thing to prove it in court. Because in court, what court does is it takes the emotion out, it slows down the process, and it uncovers facts. That takes a while. You have to be dispassionate to do that.
Dispassionate. So you have to slow everything down,
Yep.
bring the facts out, and that's why court's so important.
The court takes the emotion and the passion. It doesn't always eliminate it. Right? It's not perfect, but it's the best hope we have to slow down the process to find the truth.
So the first check and balance on society to get to truth, is that what we were doing here?
Right.
The first one was the media.
Yeah, we got a bunch of journalists out there sniffing around looking for information to give to us.
The second one was the court system.
The court system holds the press in check. You can't just print anything you want. And so if it's not true, if it's defamatory, if it's damaging to people, you can take people to court. So
Civil court.
You can take it, yeah.
They don't go to jail for saying things that aren't true. They might
Right.
have to pay damages, which is a very key distinction because you don't want the government prosecuting saying
right.
something wrong.
But you want
real
citizens
damages-
to protect themselves
Yes.
from other citizens.
That's a way underrated safety net in our society.
It's huge. I'll give you an example, and this covers some of the fallacies. Is a few years ago, Rachel Maddow, who would be on the left in terms of journalism and media, was sued by a conservative organization for defamation. And this went to court. There's enough evidence there that she said things that were defamatory against this conservative organization. And her defense in court, her lawyer's defense was, no reasonable person could think that she was giving in her show, which is on MSNBC, no reasonable person could think that she was actually espousing facts.
That was the defense?
The defense was it's because it's the entertainment defense. In other words, she's an entertainer and she's sharing her opinion, and you can do that.
Our
Right?
thing is a complete joke. So therefore, I don't think you can really hold her to account.
Right.
But she's not the only one who used that as a
Right.
defense.
So Tucker Carlson did the same thing on the right. All right. So when Tucker Carlson gets sued for one of the women who said, I don't know how much you want to put it.
Just say it.
Okay. Let me just say this. There are two kinds of voters. There are voters who believe what their favorite media source says about the indictment. And then there are voters who actually go and read the indictment.
Okay.
All right. So Tucker Carlson was sued over one of the women who claimed that she had an illicit affair with Donald Trump. And because Carlson said some things about her that were defamatory. She took Carlson to court, and the Fox News lawyers used the same defense. No reasonable person could think that Tucker is actually reporting facts. He's an entertainer. He has an entertainment hour, and he's sharing his opinion. And
so both on the left, quote, the left and the right, so if I understand correctly, you're telling me that the court system is to slow down everything and to pull out the facts and be very deliberate about how we're finding truth.
that's right.
And on both the quote left and the quote right, we have on record both of them saying, you can't believe us.
On the left and the right, there's propaganda.
Okay.
And the judges ruled in favor of both Maddow and Tucker Carlson.
Really?
Oh, they said they escaped because of that. It was an effective argument. They have freedom of speech.
Meaning
which
it was
again,
a logical argument.
yeah, the argument that they made in court to defend them was a logical argument because it's defending free speech.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think
And this
about
is
that.
why, all of this too is why we portray Lady Justice as wearing what? I mean, she's got a robe. but
She's
what
got a
else does she-
blindfold on.
she's wearing a blindfold.
Right.
Like it's meant to communicate. I mean, you got the scales of balance and you got the blindfold. And sometimes she's also portrayed with a sword on her hip.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot going on with that particular personification of what justice ought to look like. The sword isn't loaded and ready. It's not ideal. We don't want to we're not quick to use this, but it's there. And these decisions, this weighing in the balance, blind weighing in the balance, just weighing in the balance, it does have teeth because somebody in society will need to be the decider and the arbiter of disputes.
And the blindfold is depicting the principle of impartiality.
Yes.
And that is a fundamentally Judeo-Christian ethic. That is what the book of James is about, for example. You should not show partiality to the rich because they're rich, but you also have scripture that says don't show partiality to the poor because they're poor. What matters is the fact. What are the facts of the case?
Wow. Okay.
In all of this stuff, these are lofty ideals. We want to make good judgments. We're having arbitration of disputes. Everyone's always negotiating with everybody. I didn't like it when you made that argument with me years ago, Destin, but I've kind of come around. Like, everyone negotiates. And some of that negotiation is honest, friendly, fun, and just part of the normal give and take of life, banter even, you could call it. Some of it's pretty intense and pretty high stakes. If there are two people, negotiation will occur. There are more than two people. Negotiation is constantly occurring. So as a result, the question becomes, what are the ground rules for that negotiation, especially if some sort of third party steps in to mediate the dispute? There have to be ground rules. Now, it's very tempting and alluring to reduce the ground rules to the equivalent of a logical street fight, which is just to say, whoever can stir the passions of the 12 people on this jury best, or whoever can stir the passions of their audience best, they shall be declared the winner. Is it good? Who cares? Is it just? I guess so. It happened. But then the other perspective, and the slower and boringer perspective, would be, even though this is an abstract task that we're carrying out here, trying to get to truth, there have to be ground rules, and there have to be ground rules that everybody agrees on, and they're not even legal ground rules. They're just ones and zeros math ground rules applied to thought. And if I'm understanding you correctly, it seems like that's where you're suggesting that the logical fallacy thing comes in, is that these are the places where people are most likely to cheat their way into emotion to cut a logical corner and get to a quick result.
Right.
And they're slippery and they're sneaky and they work even on smart people. And that's why they're pernicious. And that's why I'm assuming you learned them so you could catch them when they're happening.
That's
and
right.
I'm assuming you can catch them when they're happening in your own mind and when you want to pull the trigger on those yourself.
That's right.
This episode of No Dumb Questions is supported by patrons of the program, affectionately known as the Winged Hussars. And we reached out to several people, and we asked them if they would be willing to tell us why they support No Dumb Questions. And we got a really cool response from two local guys here. And we thought it'd be fun to just play this for you and let you hear why Charlie and Clark support No Dumb Questions on Patreon.
I'm Charlie.
And I'm Clay. We live in Huntsville, Alabama, but we were born in Nebraska.
We're patrons of No Dumb Questions because we really enjoy listening and learning from how Destin and Matt think through things.
And we support No Dumb Questions so it can keep going.
And because we love hearing from Barnacles and Testicles.
Since they're huge nerds.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Charlie and Clark. We are grateful. And maybe we'll see each other out and about at a restaurant or like when I'm pumping gas or something. So, yeah, I'm grateful to Charlie and Clark for supporting on patreon.com/nodumbquestions. And if you feel the same way at all, or you just want to pitch in on this thing, we'd appreciate it. That's it. Let's get back to the discussion. So let me ask you this. I try desperately to get smarter every day. I try to read. I try to listen to people that are smarter than myself. But I can feel that I'm susceptible to certain things. Mm-hmm. What would you say is a logical fallacy that probably catches me off guard and probably is effective on me often, and something that what's a blind spot I might have in this area that I might not know about?
I don't know about you personally. I mean, I know you well, but you're a good thinker, so I can't think of anything that you would be particularly vulnerable to. Let me go over a few common ones. Maybe that'll hit you. Probably the most common one is the ad hominem, right? So ad hominem is Latin for to the man. And so an ad hominem argument is when you take your focus off the argument itself and off the facts of the matter, and you make personal attacks on the person who's making the case.
Okay, the reason I don't think that's a logical fallacy is because you're a jerk.
He's a pastor. He's a pastor, and
Yeah.
so like he's coming at this from a
Look at your
Christian
weird
angle.
shirt.
Yeah, I don't know that we can trust him.
I wear my glasses with one of the little things sticking out.
Right? I know.
That's why I don't think that
you
is
did.
one.
Yeah, so you committed several fallacies there. and one of them is the red herring fallacy. You said, look at me, I got a red herring. Look at my red herring. So, yeah.
What is the red herring?
A red herring is, if you're in a marketplace, red herring is supposedly, I don't know about herrings, but supposedly they're rare. So you hold it up and say, look at this red herring. And so it doesn't have anything to do with the conversation you're in or with the argument you're making, but you use it as a distraction, especially if you see that you're starting to lose the argument. You use it as a distraction, and you could say, yeah, but what about you?
This is one of the only ones I've read about, and I heard it a different way. I heard that when hunters are, like, they have dogs that are, this sounds so stupid saying it out loud, so I'm second-guessing my thing I heard. I heard that when hunters have dogs and they're tracking something, to throw them off the trail, if you were to put a red herring out in the woods somewhere, the dogs would go to that instead of the thing you're tracking.
I've never heard that before, but it still illustrates you're distracting, right? I kind of doubt that story because what's the point of red?
Oh,
I see. You can't smell red.
Okay.
So
there you go.
That was logic.
Yeah, he just
he did.
I just felt like I got body slammed to the mat.
Oh, come on. Maybe a little. Ad hominem is the first one we're bringing up. To the man. Maybe a recent example I can think of that would be 2016 Republican debates. I tend towards civil liberty. There was a candidate in that who intrigued me at the time, the son of Rand Paul. He's a senator from Kentucky in our country. He was like kind of the one guy on the stage being like, hey, we should have the Fourth Amendment again, where you can't just spy on Americans. You have to get a warrant. So I love that. That's my heart language. Mm-hmm. It works on me. Camilla whispers things like that to me, and I'm like, let's just make out right now. It really works on me. And so he's saying that stuff, and like I'm feeling like I really like this Rand Paul guy.
Let's go talk about private things.
He makes some argument about, illegal courts, secret courts, and spying on people and warrantless searches and all of this stuff. And then Donald Trump, who, don't want to spoil it, but he went on to win the entire election and become president of the United States of America. He turns to the crowd after Rand Paul says that. And he's like, look at this guy's hair. Look at his stupid hair. His hair looks stupid and he looks dumb. And that was it. That's what he said to Rand Paul's complicated argument about the Fourth Amendment and the importance of preserving the legal reality of warrants for searches. Like, that's ad hominem.
That's right. One of the most effective people at it, of course, would be Donald Trump. So he dispatched Marco Rubio with Little Marco. He dispatched Jeb Bush with Sleepy Jeb, or, didn't have enough
he had
energy.
A point. If you kind of look at his face, it's...
Crooked Hillary. Course, I remember hearing Crooked Hillary.
Crooked Hillary is another one. He's really effective at attaching names to people that are demeaning, but he's not the only one. I mean, I'm not here to pick on Donald Trump, although he has kind of legitimized that in public discourse. I mean, I'm old enough to remember a few things, and you didn't hear that in political discourse before. So an ad hominem argument...
It was more sophisticated before.
It was. You had to be smarter to do it, and you had to be clever to do it, which I kind of admire. The British, if you've ever watched Parliament, they're just really good at it. But the thing about an ad hominem argument is that it's intellectually lazy. All right, it's a way to bypass having to debate actual policy that your opponent holds. You don't have to master foreign or domestic policy. You can just call them a name. Mm-hmm. But we all tend to do it. I heard one politician say about that time, he made a great point in a speech he was making. He said, look, we're trying to persuade people to come to our position. That's what persuasion is. You will not persuade them. You might feed your base and make them real excited about you if you feed them that kind of red meat, calling people names. But you won't persuade people to come to your side if you call them a name. And he said, you can call them an idiot. He said, how effective has that ever been? He said, you say, well, you're an idiot. And have you ever heard a person then respond, well, now that I think about it, I am an idiot. I'm going to take your position on this.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's really ineffective in persuading people. It's effective in building your base. I came across a year or so ago a YouTube video of Hubert Humphrey and John F. Kennedy debating each other in the West Virginia primary of the 1960 Democratic primary. They both wanted to be president. Both of those men had mastered policy, foreign and domestic policy, and they had substantive discussion. This was televised on policy. They were so polite and they were courteous. None of the ad hominem arguments. That would just not make good TV today. What makes good TV, what boosts the ratings are ad hominem arguments.
Okay, so but you're helping me understand, Matt, by bringing up, what is it he said? Look at his hair.
Stupid hair. Look at his hair.
You're ugly and your mama dresses you funny.
Yeah. So by bringing that up, you're helping me understand the danger. It's like a monster at the gates here. So like, if we all collectively accept that this type of rhetoric can happen in our political discourse, then the person who is the most crass and the most, I don't know, what am I trying to say? What word am I trying to say? Vocabulary is stumping me again.
It's verbally abusive.
So the most verbally abusive person wins.
But they don't win because it resonates with the audience. That's part of it. It also wins because, as Mike Tyson once famously said, everyone has a plan until
you punch them in the mouth.
They get punched in the face or the mouth.
It's a really weird thing to expect that you're going to have a sophisticated debate about the merits of the Fourth Amendment and what it looks like to preserve that in a post 9/11 world, and then have somebody make fun of you because of your hair, and the audience go, ooh.
Yeah.
So what do you
Burn.
do? I mean, it takes you off your game. We're not doing this.
So what do you
now.
do, Steve? Let's say Matt and I are debating right now, and Matt rightfully points out that I have a
shovel head.
Exactly. So I have a shovel head, and I was trying to make
you rightfully point out that I
have a. That was a weird gesture. I don't like it. Steve, I'm sorry that Matt had to do that. I'm sorry. But
hey, one of the reasons I love listening to your podcast is it takes me back to 8th grade.
That's why we're here. You're the adult in the room, man. So if we're having a debate and Matt points out my shovel head, there's an ad hominem attack used to derail me or to try to win the audience. Well, do you know of any good defenses against that? Or because if I say, actually, Matt, that's a ad hominem attack. I do know that my head looks like a shovel, but
it's more like a spade.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not an effective counter.
Okay. Before I tell you what to do, let me tell you what not to do. The thing where you will lose. If you respond defensively with emotion, anger doesn't play well with that. But if it looks like it doesn't affect you, if it's water off your back, and you just keep plowing on, as if it didn't bother you, they're trying to get an emotional response from you. And the worst thing you can do is I had two sisters growing up. If they called me a name, what did I do?
You just got angry.
I called them a name.
Oh, okay.
You stupid head. And so, again...
Tina, can we delete or just bleep what Steve just said?
The stupid head. That's pretty rough, Steve. This is a family podcast.
You really took us into the gutter.
At my house.
We were doing fine.
And we were not allowed
here.
to say stupid. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was fine with the comment, but the stupid head, it's too far,
much,
Dr. Bateman.
So this is why, again, most of the people I'm working with are professing Christians. And we have a message that we believe is life-changing, and that is a message of urgency in the gospel. And what I tell people is that if we're representing the gospel, we've got to have credibility, which means that we cannot use the same tactics they use against us. All right.
When you say they, who is they?
Any opponent.
Okay.
Right. And right now,
like an enemy, or what does opponent mean in this context?
Well, it could be a political opponent. It could be someone who is a philosophical opponent or a theological opponent. People they don't agree with you on something very important.
So you're saying a Christian is called to a higher standard in how they debate?
Exactly.
Okay.
So let me give you an example. James 1:19. Says this is one of the key verses for just about any relationship. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. All right, now think about that. That is a de-escalating policy. That's how you de-escalate quarrels. So if you're quick to listen, that means that you love that person, even if you disagree with them. Christians are not called to agree with everybody. We're called to love people we disagree with. So even if you disagree with them, you have to love them enough to understand them before you disagree with them. And you have to listen to them and understand their position so that you could restate their position in a way that they would recognize it.
I've noticed you do that. And it's fun to see you do that in a crowd that, I'll go out on a limb here, may be hostile to the truth. Like, I've seen you speak in front of various crowds, and I've seen you say something that is not in the Overton window of accepted ideas for the crowd you're speaking to. And that takes courage. I know you to be a brave man. I think that's admirable. I admire that in you, and that's a quality I want. And so, I don't know, I just want to tell you that to make it feel weird for you. Okay, so we're called to a higher standard if you are a Christian, but there's people that aren't Christians, right? And so...
Yeah, and aren't bad. Like, opponent in this context doesn't mean someone that you necessarily need to defeat or don't find common cause with. We're using debate terminology here. And like what we're talking about is someone, even playfully or hypothetically, with whom we are assuming opposite sides of a conversation, maybe with real stakes behind it, maybe not. And sometimes the debate language for people who are uninitiated can sound really combative just by the terminology that's used to frame it.
Right.
But in this sense, we're talking, if I'm hearing you right, talking about anybody, you might just see something different than.
Any conversation where you disagree. If you are a true Christian, you are 24 hours a day an ambassador for Jesus Christ. Right? So you represent him in every setting, in every conversation. So that being quick to listen should be part of one of our traits. Slow to speak means you've thought about this before you say it, which that's the slowing down process, that's where the logic comes in and you're reasonable about what you say. You can always say something, you can never unsay something. So once it's out there, you can't get it back. So you're quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And the anger part, that level of anger in our political and public discourse right now is dangerous. That's the dangerous part. And so what I'm saying, if you're a follower of Jesus, don't contribute to that.
What if you're not? What is the reason you might want to do this if you're not a
yeah,
Christian?
This applies to everybody. I mean, even unbelievers can see the reasonableness of, okay, let me be quick to listen. If you're not a Christian, but you want a better marriage, try this out for size, right? Try listening to your wife. It's called active listening. Most marriage counselors will be able to tell you about it when they're teaching you communication skills. So active listening means you're really engaged, you really understand what she's saying. You hear not only her words, but you can hear her heart. And then you're real careful about what you say next.
Do you have
can't
to,
get that back.
when you're active listening, do you have to affirm everything the other person's saying?
You don't have to agree with everything they're saying. This is hard for guys who are, and I say guys meaning men, especially if they're in hard sciences and they're all big on logic and everything. There's something in them that doesn't want to let something get by if they think it's not true. They think they got to correct everybody's error. The main thing she needs to know is that you understood what she said, not whether you think it's true or not or right or not. Until she feels understood, you haven't understood her. That's what you're after. And then so you're slow to speak and then you're slow to anger. And how many times have we said things in anger that have threatened or destroyed friendships, relationships?
That you don't think an hour later. Like you sort of thought it then in a flash, but 10,000 foot view, I don't actually think that.
Mm-hmm.
So
right. That's right.
We took I'm sorry, I derailed us a couple of times in there. We took a windy road, but you were telling me about things that you see people fall victim to often. And you told me about the ad hominem. You told me about the red herring. Is there anything else that is a common thing that happens, like a fallacy that...
Yeah, I can think of a couple. One is the centrist fallacy. And the centrist fallacy is the idea that the truth always lies between two opinions. If someone says, I believe this, A, and someone says, I believe C, then the truth must be B. That's not right. People who call themselves moderates often make this mistake. If someone says, I believe, like in Nazi Germany, all right, let's go back to, there are a lot of fallacies in Nazi Germany. But if someone says, I believe that all Jewish people need to be exterminated. And someone says, I believe no Jewish people should be exterminated. The truth of the matter is not in the middle. Well, let's just exterminate half of them.
God, this is like...
That's withering.
That is withering logic there. Okay.
Yeah. So the truth is the truth. It's true because it's true, not because it's between two extreme positions.
We do a thing with the kids on this one to avoid the moderate error or the idealization of moderate meaning half of a thing.
Right.
I will say ridiculous things to them that are just false. Drives Destin crazy.
Yeah.
He likes to say only the things that are true. Doesn't like it as much when I say things that are absurdly false.
Right.
But I mean, that is a lie, but it's shtick. So I'm giving myself permission. Not Destin's favorite thing, whatever. So I do this with the kids. We'll be sitting around the table talking about things, and I'll just make something up that's ridiculous. Outlandishly ridiculous. You know, I ran into your piano teacher today, kiddo. Oh, what did she say? Well, she was actually doing a public demonstration downtown. She was burning a piano. So she's not going to do piano lessons anymore. She's against it now. Dad! And then I'm like, look, there's a 50-50 chance that that is true. Because there's only two ways this could go. Either she did that or she didn't. 50% chance I'm telling the truth. and for the longest time, they would sit there and be like, okay, that sounds right, but something's off here. and so, you know what I'm trying to
You're
teach
teaching
them
critical thinking.
jokingly.
Yeah.
Yes, is to weigh the merit instead of simply doing math. I'm teaching them to
I
try
think
to
that's
avoid
great.
this.
That parents should be doing this with their kids all the time. When my kids were
See?
when my kids were in the house, we played Spot the Lie, and Spot the Lie is watching commercials. What's the messaging in that commercial telling you?
Oh, wow.
Beer commercials where everybody's happy and everybody knows your name, and if you drink this brand of beer is the message, or whatever it is. Just get your kids thinking like that. They should have some healthy skepticism about the messages that they're getting.
I don't think there's any lie in those Modelo commercials.
The most interesting man alive.
No, there's no lie in those Dos Equis commercials. Don't you dare question the most interesting man alive. He emotionally connected with me. No, the Modelo ones that have the sort of, what's the guy's name? Enrico Marcioni? Is he the dude who did the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly music?
Yeah.
It's like that kind of Italian spaghetti Western music, but it's set to ads targeted at Latinos. And it just shows Latinos busting their butts at things and being awesome. Art, running a restaurant, fixing crap. I mean, stuff that you watch and you're like, dang, I kind of wish I was Mexican. All they do is crush it at things. And it's true. And it smacks of truth. And then the idea is like, dude, have a beer. You're good at things. You've earned this. You bust your butt.
Have this particular beer.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on.
So
You cannot paint the hood of that bouncing hydraulic car and have a PBR, dude. That's gross. And I'm offended that you even sort
Maybe
of
Natty
intoned it.
Light. Maybe Natty Light.
Maybe.
So did you see the Charles Barkley after?
Tell me, I love Charles Barkley.
When Alabama was in the Final Four, and he said, if they pull this off, there'll be a bunch of Alabama people. We won't have enough PBR and Natty Light.
He's so great. Have you ever heard
typical Auburn grad?
Have you ever heard Charles Barkley talk about San Antonio?
Don't do it.
Don't do
Destin,
it.
what are you doing?
Oh, okay, well, just pretend I didn't say that. Just Google Charles Barkley San Antonio, and you are welcome. He is so funny.
He has a problem.
He has a
with
problem.
San Antonio, and he's one of few people who is impervious to cancellation. So he says what he thinks about San Antonio. I would just like to say into this microphone that I do not share any of Charles Barkley's opinions about the great city or people of San Antonio.
Well, I don't have any of the data he does, so who knows? So, all right. So you've given me, what was the first one? Ad hominem. You've given me red herring, where you kind of distract somebody by saying something that's, and
we covered centrist fallacy.
Centrist fallacy.
Can I ask a question about red herring? We kind of hustled on that one. What is the difference between the red herring fallacy and a term that was popular in the late 20-teens called whataboutism? Are those the same thing, or is there a degree of difference between these?
A lot of these overlap. So whataboutism is going to be a form of red herring. All right. So instead of, the whataboutism is you criticize something that I'm doing or my party's doing or my people are doing. And instead of engaging with what you just accused me of, I just distract you with the red herring of saying, yeah, but what about you? What about your party? What you did? We had this protest, but you had that protest, and yours got out of hand and burned down buildings, that sort of thing.
Wow. Okay.
So that's a way of escaping having to deal with what you've been accused of.
So here's my thing. I kind of like whataboutism in certain environments, in that if someone is claiming that the reason we all need to do their thing is because they just deeply morally care about this thing, and that is the reason their argument is true, is because of how much they deeply morally care about it.
Yeah. At
that point, I don't think it's a logical fallacy, but rather a valid counter argument to say, but you only care about it once. Here are 50 similar situations in which you don't. What should then, I think, happen to make it stronger would be to say, so let me bounce it back to you and maybe offer some more supporting arguments for why we should all do the thing that you like, because there isn't enough consistency on your first assertion based on your track record.
No, I have no problem with that. If they make an accusation against me, then I think there's no problem with saying, okay, let me talk to you about what you just said about my position. Then after that, can I talk to you about your position? And that's what about your position? Then you bring in another fallacy, which is the double standard fallacy, right? And show them how they're committing a double standard fallacy. If what you're saying about my position is true for me, then it's true for you.
We're trying to move forward and get to this list of very practical, useful things, and I keep derailing us. So we've got 4 that you've thrown out so far. What are some of the other really big ones that you see in circulation right now?
Okay, one of the most common ones is the false dilemma fallacy. What I mean by that is, whatever the problem is or the question is, when you limit the only answers to that or the only solutions are 2, and you're excluding the middle, is sometimes called the excluded middle fallacy. An example would be, I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. And you say, therefore, you voted for someone who's racist.
I see.
Mm-hmm. Therefore, you voted for, I didn't vote for candidate A, therefore you voted for candidate B. Well, you can't conclude that. You may have written someone in. You may have voted for candidate C. So if someone says, okay, I didn't vote for the Democrats, and say, therefore, you are a racist, homophobe, white supremacist, right? Well, there's actually other options, right? Or I didn't vote for Donald Trump, therefore you must be a woke Marxist. See, those are all false dilemmas.
So if I understand correctly, you're saying there's 2 sides. If there's a reduction in the acceptable answer to the problem to 2 choices, that's a fallacy.
Yeah, you're excluding other options that could be, it's a non sequitur. It doesn't follow that if you don't take this position, you must take that position. And so we get accused of that. What we've done in our public discourse now is you got to choose one side or the other, but there actually might be other positions that are legitimate. I don't mind telling you I'm a theological and political conservative. I'm a principled conservative. I don't believe everyone in the Republican Party right now holds to principled conservatism. I think there's a lot of populism going on, and so I would be opposed to that movement within the Republican Party. Just because I'm opposed to that movement in the Republican Party doesn't mean I'm a Democrat or a socialist. You see what I'm talking about? So if we give each other space to think through these issues, and there's more nuance to the political positions.
So would you agree that unless we defeat the false dichotomy fallacy, the world will end?
Yeah, so that's a great example of the false dilemma fallacy.
I read a lot of Reddit, and I have noticed throughout the years there's been this shift. Like, Reddit used to be a more intellectually, first of all, intellectually stimulating place. Robust, yeah, that's a good word. I've noticed there's a reduction in the number of acceptable viewpoints in almost every Reddit thread that I've read recently. So there was this post on Reddit, and there was this politician that took this position that I happened to agree with, and I was looking at it, and the first comment right at the top, the ad hominem attacks started. They're like, well, of course this person would think this way because they're this kind of person. And then right after that, it came in with all these different logical fallacies that we're talking about, and I can just see it's like Reddit is crumbling before us, and it's very difficult to get logical stuff back out of it. You're just seeing people attack each other. Boom, boom, boom. And I saw the top 3 comments. I started looking at it and I was like, none of these address the very important question that this person is trying to answer. It's bang, bang, bang. And then they all got upvoted because it made everyone feel right.
There you go.
Yeah.
You ever see the video of the guy with the tub? It's maybe like a 3 or 4 gallon tub, like a tote that you buy at Walmart to store things. And in it are a whole bunch of little finishing nails, maybe 2.5-inch finishing nails with no head, right? And they're all just a scattered mess. And he takes the tub and he just, like working...
like vibrating it,
shaking
it?
Yeah, just shakes it up and down, up and down, up and down. You're like, what the heck are you doing, dude? But over time, the longer it shakes, the more the nails all get into line. And by the time he's done shaking that thing, somehow these nails have all stacked themselves. And I've seen it with dice and a tube and other things. You could explain it if that were what we were talking about right now. But I feel like Reddit is the tub and the nails are the vast diversity of nuanced positions that can exist. If the debate is, will the coin flip be a head or a tail? Okay, that's not a false dichotomy. That's a dichotomy because there are only 2 outcomes and we're not giving you the option to not flip it. It will be flipped. 1 or a 0. Very simple. People like gambling on things like that. But on all of this stuff, where theoretically we're trying to make human thriving happen and answer the huge questions about life, death, and eternity and how you live with people who come to different conclusions and share resources in a way that is just and considerate of others, there are so many proposed solutions to that. And I feel like Reddit is a place where it has become the bucket of shaking that into only one uniposition, and any other position will be either thrown out or stacked neatly with the others.
To your point, I've noticed, so having a public presence on the internet, I have noticed a trend where a person, if they ever see me out on the internet, if I'm ever in a comment thread or something like that, most people are awesome, like just really great people. There's this very small minority of people who will try to find me and corner me. I can tell they're trying to get me to say one of 2 positions. Like you have to take position A or you have to take position B. And you can see right through it. The way the question is asked, it can only be this or this.
Right.
And they try to pin you down and they say, well, okay, we have him on record. Now that he is this, now we know how to attack him. We can call him this word now. Or I have noticed that happening more and more, and your thought of the shaking of the bucket with the nails, it's interesting, but you're absolutely right. It's like society is the bucket. So if that's true, who's been doing the shaking?
Who's been doing the shaking?
Are market forces for advertising? External manipulators? Like who's been doing the shaking?
A monopoly on ideas, a monopoly on a product cannot exist without the power of the sword to back it up. Monopolies only happen when violence is employed, either by the state or by the corporation that has the monopoly. So I don't think it's one party making that shaking out happen. I think it's multifaceted.
What else you got? So these are brilliant. Do you have another one?
I tell you, one of the more dangerous ones is appeal to repetition.
What was it again?
Appeal to repetition.
So sorry.
Appeal to repetition.
Sorry, man.
That was not funny.
You think I know this by now?
Funny.
So what does this one mean?
All right, this was famously used by Hitler, sometimes called the big lie. And so he kept repeating the lie that the Jewish people as a people were responsible for so many of the woes in Europe and Germany in particular. Research has shown that if people hear a lie often enough, they'll start to view it as legitimate. They'll start to view it as the truth.
Do they actually view it as legitimate, or are they just getting worn down and tired of having to
Seeking
defend it?
acceptance.
I don't know what happens subconsciously, but probably something like, well, they wouldn't keep saying it if it wasn't true,
Okay.
right? If they said it and it was wrong and someone corrected them, then they wouldn't say it anymore. But if you keep saying it over and over again, it's like, oh, well, there must be something here, even though other people are saying it's a lie.
This is my nothing can happen fallacy that I was telling you about in terms of safety.
With your family?
Yeah. Like, don't give in when we're traveling, when we're out and about. Keep your eyes up. Do not give in to the nothing can happen fallacy.
Okay, so I don't think we've talked about this with mics on before. So basically,
Oh, maybe we haven't. What I mean by this is just the lulled to sleep effect that happens when you're in an official place, like an airplane, an airport, a mall, a parking lot, wherever. We're like, well, they wouldn't let us just walk around here if anything bad could happen. So let's completely drop all of our defenses and credulously soak in whatever is going on. And so I always make fun of that nothing could happen thing with my kids. Something can always happen. Just pay attention. But it's that same sort of thing, that repetition of...
It does wear people down eventually.
I'm going to level with you, Steve. There are some public opinions that I don't think are true. Yeah, that's dangerous to say, right?
Yeah.
And so I have noticed that to maintain my position on those public opinions, I am not safe to talk about those things.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because the culture has heard these things so often, so frequently now. There are things that are being held publicly that are absurd.
Yes.
And to say that they are is really dangerous.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
So do you think it's because of these logical fallacies that we've arrived at this stage?
Yeah, and we're not machines. We're not logic machines. We're people. We have emotions. And the power of acceptance is huge. In other words, we tend to adopt the ideas of the people who accept us. When I was a youth pastor for years, and I saw this happening in a microcosm in high school, right? And you got the different groups. And in those days, it was the surfers or the skateboarders or the punk rockers or the athletes or the jocks and the cheerleaders.
Sounds like a cool high school.
It does. They surf there. It's awesome.
So what happens is who accepts you, you'll eventually find yourself adopting what they say, even if at one point you disagreed with it. We're just human beings. That can happen to all of us. Christians, not Christians, it doesn't matter. So we have to constantly be on guard for that.
So, Matt, how do you think we should land the plane here?
When I was in college, my main advisor would always say that we had to write this section at the end of all of our papers. It was topics for further research or discussion. And I didn't understand it. It just helped me make my page count and get it done lazily when I was a freshman. Like, oh, there's so much. And I would fill that up. And he loved it. He'd give me these great marks and be like, that's so good. And I was like, oh, I was just trying to bloat my paper so I wouldn't have to do more actual research. I can spout questions all day. This is wonderful. But here I feel like that's the case. We went 2 inches down about 50 paths that are miles long. I mean, we could start a spin-off podcast with Steve called The Logical Fallacy Podcast and just chase down one per episode. And I don't think I would get bored.
Right.
So I do have follow-up questions, and I know we don't have time to get to them. One of them that I would love to sit and talk with you about on mics at some point is, why is it better to be a critical thinker than not a critical thinker? I would love to ask you, how do you know if you are good at that? How would you know? Because if I don't have critical thinking skills yet, how would I know that I don't have them? And there are things that you brought up that I've not thought of, even though I imagine myself to have gone to school for this. Well, that's kind of jarring for me. So question number 2 is, how do I know if I don't have these skills, if it takes these skills to know that I have them? And then 3, if I determine that I am not as good a critical thinker as I would like to be, how do I get better at something like that? And I know that we can't tear into it right now, but it's really fun to sit around and pretend like I knew all of this and be like, yeah, that was dumb. Those are bad ideas. People shouldn't think that. But there are ways that you've framed logical fallacies that I say I'm against, that I'm quietly sitting over here going, well, I've done that, and I've done that recently, and I like to imagine I'm okay at thinking. Clearly, I have holes in my ability to think.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just like to game it out more. I thought I was going to tag team with you and teach the internet about some stuff, but this has been discreetly humbling for me.
It's interesting. And one thing that I would like, if you're able to come on in the future, one thing that I would like to learn from you is how to debate well, not argue. I don't know, maybe argue is the word. What am I trying to say?
I tell you, I heard something years ago that stuck with me. G.K. Chesterton, who's a Roman Catholic scholar and author, he said, "My principal objection to a quarrel is that it ruins a good argument."
Okay.
And I think that's a really good distinction.
So an argument is the exchange of ideas?
Yes, and it has to be as dispassionate as possible. It has to assume the best about the person you're talking to. All right. We disagree. I want you to come to my position. I want to persuade you. And what's the best way to persuade you? We don't have time to talk about it, but many of you are familiar with Aristotle's 3 modes of persuasion: logos, ethos, and pathos. I think Jesus Christ is one of the best examples. Even though Aristotle is 300 years before Jesus, I think Jesus really exemplifies those 3 modes of persuasion effectively. If we learn the importance of that, I think that gets to your question about debate and keeping those things in mind. What are we trying to do? So the difference between a quarrel and an argument is a quarrel, the objective is dominance. An argument, the objective is truth. In an argument, we're trying to find what is the truth, and that's more important than me winning. Whereas a quarrel is, I got to win this thing.